Welcome to the 78th episode of the Jewish Drinking Show, your source for drinking in the Jewish tradition, literature, history, wisdom, life, and much, much more. I'm your host, Rabbi Drew Kaplan. I'm excited to welcome back, technically, second-time guest, Mendy Mark, because in the first part, which we recorded both of these together in the spring. The first part, he talked about the pre-pandemic liquor sales, just sort of what typically went on in a liquor store in New Jersey in a heavily Orthodox populated area. And now we're going to go continuing on into that recording, but now we're talking about pandemic sales. So here we go.
So now what about the people's purchasing predilections during the pandemic? Yeah. So we'll just start there. What you mentioned about simchas, smachot, about celebrations. What have you noticed? I mean, we could talk about everything, but let's just start there. Clearly, people aren't having the same weddings, brises, all these different life cycle events. So I imagine that hasn't been happening as much as far as sales with those, right?
Correct. So again, and as COVID, from when COVID started, right? So we go back to in Teaneck and in Bergen County, it was Shushan Purim, right? It was the day after Purim is when the RCBC, Purim was Tuesday, that Wednesday night, the RCBC got together, and Thursday morning is when they sent out the letters shutting down the schools, the shuls, the restaurants in Bergen. And Bergen County was the first place across the whole country where they shut all this stuff. So the rabbis shut the shuls, the schools, the restaurants.
I remember Bergen County, and then I think Los Angeles followed suit afterwards, and then it just
and then everybody else followed suit shortly after.
Right. That was maybe March 10th-ish, give or take a day.
Yeah, right around there. It was a Thursday. It was a Thursday. We had a taste. So we always do tastings on Thursday nights, wine tastings, whiskey tastings, and we canceled that tasting.
It was March 12th was that Thursday.
Oh, well, there you go. So we had a tasting, and then this letter came out, and they canceled. Right, they're canceling school. They're canceling shul, and I'm like, well, we can't do our we shouldn't be doing a tasting, so we canceled the tasting. And we haven't done a tasting in the store yet. Hopefully, we're going to start again soon with with masks and with different protocols. But we have not. A lot of liquor stores have already started doing tastings again, but we have not. So what your question was, how's
the pandemic affecting smachot, right?
So what's interesting is what happened right away, right? So there was no simcha, right? First 3 months of COVID, nobody was doing anything, right? Nobody was leaving, no one was going anywhere. Right. But then when they started opening up outdoor minyanim again, and then so they were doing to go, kiddush to go, and similar, right? And everything was so. The mini bottles, the 50 ml.
The 50 ounce, yeah.
Right, which for filler up, Purim, we always do a lot, and we buy a lot Purim, and then we keep a lot, and we sell throughout the year.
You sell out of them?
A little bit. So I was purchasing. Right away, I realized this was going to be a thing, and so we made a bigger section, and I went through with my salespeople, all the different companies, and bought more and more and more, especially with the single malt scotch. I usually only had 2 or 3. I had 7 options, bourbons, everything. And that has become super popular.
Has that remained true to this day?
So far, it's gotten a little less because now people are starting to buy big bottles and they're starting to share bottles.
They're getting vaccinated. They're
getting vaccinated. And so this summer will be a little less on that. But it's still, I think it will stay. Some people like that. There are different, you know what I mean?
Really?
Which is funny. But, I got an email from one of the shuls locally the other day, say, hey, what are your prices on, tequila and bourbons in the little bottles? And so it's definitely still a thing, especially as shuls go back, start doing kiddushes. A lot of synagogues have not allowed food or liquor or anything inside the shul, or even in their outside tents. Some of them, yes. But now they're going to start doing that now through the summer. So it'll be interesting.
Do it outdoors.
They're doing it outdoors, right? It'll be interesting how that goes. And then simchas really started, I would say, they started going back even with more than just the little bottles in the summer. And it was but again, everything was way smaller. Instead of a 400 person wedding, it was 50 people. Instead of, and so all these, and we're talking about weddings. I have a customer of mine who did a wedding 2.5 years ago, and they spent, they did a bar mitzvah 2.5 years ago, and they spent almost $7,000 in liquor.
It's great.
Okay. Yeah. And wine and liquor. And then they're doing one and he calls me and he's apologizing. Mendy, I'm so sorry. I'm like, why are you don't apologize to me. Like,
you should apologize to the owner.
Right. This is COVID. This is like, this is what it is. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it was still more than a lot of the other simchas, because this guy likes high end and he wants to, you know what I mean? And so
wow.
And we get clients all different. We have clients that do simchas, with Vaynerchuk or Barkan Classic, and they're using, Glenmorangie 10-year, on the Scotch, which is still good. All these things are good. But there's a difference between what, value and where you're going with it. So that was a huge change to the simchas. But since we're now on the COVID conversation, and when we got into what you're talking about with Shushan Purim, so that right there changed everything for the store. So that was a Thursday, right, when we canceled our
March 12th, 2020. It's kind of like, where were you when Bambi was like Bambi's mom was shot? Like,
right.
That was
So that Thursday, I started getting phone calls about Pesach orders. This is a month before Pesach, which I usually at least the week between Purim and Pesach is slow and quiet. And then the second week, it starts coming back a little alive.
But it was right after Shushan.
Right after. Wow. And I was like, I had a conversation with the owner. We did not have a real website up. We did not have an online presence, which is a different conversation. I know. And I said to him, like, we need a working website that people can go on and order online, because the phone Thursday and Friday were off the hook already. And I'm like, we need, like, people can order over the phone, because people are
coming in
now.
I can't get past this.
Please.
There was a website though, March 2020. It just couldn't not handle orders. Is that what it was?
It was just a website that had our hours and had our, you know what I mean, had you could send an email there to to ask us questions. But there was not a website that had that had what we have or anything. No, I know you're for those that are on the podcast.
Not frozen. The screen is not frozen. I just couldn't move.
I know.
Wait, so, but does the business post regularly to Facebook or to Instagram or any other social medium?
No. So a little bit to Facebook, but not really. No, we're actually still in the dark ages. I know. So we're getting there.
You know what particularly kills me about all this?
Please tell me.
One of the craziest things about all this is that one of my big influences in even starting Jewish drinking was Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah.
And Gary Vaynerchuk is a Jewish wine merchant from New Jersey.
Yes,
he got famous for building his father's liquor store and wine business in no other state. There are 49 other states. It was the state of New Jersey. And he built one of the very first ever wine websites ever to sell wine in this country.
And he's extremely successful because of it. And he grew that business tremendously. Yes.
Look what selling wines online has done for him.
Yes. No, 100%. Everything is going online. That's sort of where, that's sort of where we,
Right. Obviously, the pandemic has helped catalyze that for many industries and companies.
Totally. Right. So basically, I said to the owner, we need to do something. So we threw up a website. It was quick. Within a few days, it was up. And the phone didn't stop ringing from Shushan Purim until Pesach. The phone, and it was so funny that recently I was talking with, I have a few employees, and I have another, an Orthodox Jewish guy in his late 20s. He's really great. His name is Yaakov. And he said to me, we were talking like about a week before Pesach, and he said to me, he's like, wow, Mendy, he's like, it's so different. I'm like, what? He's like, the phone is not like, it was ringing so much that he was sitting at his Seder last year and he just heard the phone ringing in his head.
Oh my goodness!
Like it was like,
wow.
Like we constantly had 3 or 4 people on hold. We were like,
what were people trying to do? Were they trying to reduce the order since they were going to have massive family Sadarim, or the opposite?
People were just wanted to make sure that they were going to get their wine for Pesach. Mm-hmm. And what happened also because of COVID is that nobody was going away. Uh-huh. Nobody went to family. Nobody went on programs. Every program got canceled.
Right.
And so we had so many people that were telling me over the phone, so many, I'm not saying 1 or 2. I'm like at least 5 or 6, if there could have been more women that actually said to me, this is my first time making Pesach ever. Or this is my first time making Pesach in 20 years.
They always just went away to programs or family.
Went away to programs or family, and they've never done. And so, what's really awesome actually about COVID is it really showed people that you can do it, and not only that you can do it and you can make Pesach, that actually was so many people actually had a really nice, relaxed, quiet Pesach with their family, and so. And a lot of people actually didn't go away. This year there was more, and we can get that in a minute. But
people are getting vaccinated. It's changed.
Right, exactly. But there were definitely that definitely had a big impact on people. But so people, the main thing then was people were worried that they were going to close the liquor store before Pesach.
Oh, nobody it's a non-essential business, maybe.
Right. Now it happened to be. Then they said no, liquor stores are essential business.
Liquor is essential.
Liquor is essential. Right.
I think listeners can understand that.
Do you know why? You want to know do you know why the liquor business is essential? Again, I don't know if this. I heard this from 2 different sources. Okay,
I'm curious.
And no, I don't know if it's true, but is that that if liquor stores would not be essential and they would have closed them, then they were worried about the flooding of alcoholics into emergency rooms. Because people that needed to be cared for, and they didn't want those people in the emergency room.
Right,
now again, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I heard. So it makes sense, but it
makes sense. I think just whatever. This is a totally separate topic.
Totally separate.
How much? No. I was going to say how much is it sort of calm people down? It's kind of like an opiate of the masses to some degree.
Correct.
It calms people down, makes people relax, and in a way, it is essential.
Right. Correct. Totally.
Hey, I hope you've been enjoying this episode about pandemic sales featuring Mendy Mark. I hope you stay tuned for next week's episode, which will also be about pandemic sales, but not in America, in Israel. Here's a sneak peek with Joel Haber from next week, speaking about pandemic sales in Israel.
All the trends that are in beers, craft beers around the world, they happen worldwide everywhere. But usually they'll start in places like America. And so we're usually a few years behind. I know sour beers have been huge in America for a while. Yep. Our first sour beer, to my knowledge, was made by Hatch, who I will talk a little bit about later. An American, Ephraim from Long Island. He's got a nice restaurant on the Shuk called Hatch. Opened another restaurant called Schmaltz. But the point was, if I'm not mistaken, he was the first sour beer in Israel.
I hope you enjoyed that sneak peek into next week's episode. Now back into this week's episode featuring Mendy Mark.
So
speaking of which, of using alcohol as a coping mechanism during a pandemic.
Sure.
So how have you seen, sort of more broadly throughout the pandemic, how has it affected? I'm going to pick up on one thing you mentioned earlier, which was Kiddush clubs and whiskey. So how has even just more, we'll start with the Kiddush clubs and whiskey and broaden it out, but how have you noticed things changing throughout the pandemic, even beyond that first Pesach?
Sure. So I'll with whiskeys and also with wine is that, and the truth is that one thing I saw last year between Purim and Pesach, people buying wine for Pesach, is that nobody was buying high-end wine, and people weren't buying wine they didn't know. Everyone went to brands that they knew, and everyone was going to value. They were going for more and value. And then after Pesach, we were still in COVID, and everyone was still pretty much locked down in New Jersey. Is that people were going for big bottles were very popular, right? Like 1.75s of vodka and whiskey and scotch and all, right? Were very popular. People were going for value. Wow. And then again, and everybody was only drinking, it was only personal consumption. That was the whole thing. And then it sort of started switching. So people were getting together, let's say, right? Then in the
summer, it's nice out. You can get outside and drink.
Outside Minyanim started in the summer, right? It started, I think it was in June or whenever it was. So then people started getting together, and again, the little bottles. That's when the little bottles really came out, the 50 ml. And then there were different groups. Some groups of people were sharing bottles, but it was way less than in a normal year, because there were way less people getting together in groups, and there were way less, and those that were getting together in groups, some were doing their own. People were bringing their own bottles. People were, nobody was sharing anything. That was another thing at the beginning. And as it got more, as we've gotten more and more and more, we've gotten away from that, and more people being comfortable, and also with being vaccinated. In Teaneck, again, I don't know the numbers or percentages, but there's definitely a lot of people that have been vaccinated. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you this great story. This happened a couple of days after Purim, and it was a Thursday, and there was a bunch of people in the store, and there was a man who actually lost his wife at the beginning of COVID, and he was in the store, and he was, who I know, and he was talking with a couple, and they're around the similar age, somewhere in their late 60s, and they said to him, they were like, did you get your shot? He's like, yeah, I got my second shot. They're like, us too. They're like, let us know when you're ready, and let us know to come to us for a meal on Shabbos. And that was the first time that I heard people make Shabbos plans in the store in over a year, which is like, it means we're, we sort of feel we're seeing the light,
Yeah.
But I would say, so with the whiskeys, it's definitely coming more, where people are now buying more. And also when it comes to both with wine and with whiskeys and vodka and tequila, with really everything, people are now getting back to buying high end as well. Whereas people were really
only in 2021. That wasn't a 2020.
That was not a 2020 thing. That was definitely in 2021, where it's now people are coming out, and they're and again, and this Purim Pesach was very clear, was very different sales than we did last year. And the other thing that I didn't mention about last time, which is also interesting, is that last year Purim Pesach, we did about 10% of sales was in-store sales. And there was probably about 30% pickups, where what's it called, curbside, right? Where they made the order and then they came and we ran it out to them. And then the rest was delivery. We did that was the other thing I did is right away.
And that was new for 2020. That hadn't really existed, deliveries before?
So 2019 Purim Pesach, we did about 90% in-store and 10% delivery. That was 2019. Okay. So very different switch. Very different, and you have to staff differently, and you have to, and the phones and the, with the online orders was making a big, whether it's delivery or pickup or whatever it is. But people also, people didn't want to come, nobody wanted to come into the store. Nobody wanted to leave their house. And you know what I mean? That was, and some people liked that and some people didn't. In other words, there were still some people that were coming in, mass, but it was really a very small percentage of the people that were our customers. So,
wow. Yeah. And then what about 2021, this year?
So this year, thank God, it was we still did, we probably did like 20% deliveries and probably about 10% curbside, but we were probably about 70% in store.
Oh wow! And
yeah,
how much work has the website gotten on it? Can people order yet from it?
So I'll be honest. I knew you were going to ask. Is that so? Both the website and also our POS have really needed a lot. We really need to switch both what we were doing, and whatever, I can give as many excuses as I want, but at the end of the day, I wasn't able to do things early enough. And we finally found the POS that we wanted, and we found the website that we wanted to use also.
Could you integrate the POS in the website?
100. That was the whole thing.
Okay.
because they weren't integrated. Plus, I also had another website that I was using for Pesach Shul sales. So I had these 3 different things that I had to update each one. It wasn't good for many reasons. So we were like, okay, I need something that can, everything can talk to each other and all work together. Finally found out figured it out. And it was about 2 weeks before Purim and so I said, we got to wait till after Pesach because we're about to get slammed and I'm not going to have a new thing, a new POS and a new thing. So as much as I really wanted to get it all done and have it ready for this past year. So now we're already into it and hopefully within the next few months, if not before that, we'll be fully set up properly. So yeah, it's definitely a concern. Look, this is the way it is. So many people were calling me and were like, oh, I don't see your list online. How do I find your list online?
And it builds in, once you get that going, it builds in efficiency to sales, which benefits everybody. And not just the business, but the customers as well. They can make their purchases and know exactly what, all that stuff.
No. It's good for everyone. And we're going that way.
Hello, dear listeners. It's your host, Rabbi Drew. I wanted to break in right now and just say, hey, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate, or watching, however you're consuming this content. And I'm always open for new ideas, both for specifically the Jewish Drinking Show, whether it's topics, whether it's guests. I'm also looking for other resources that I can provide you with in the Jewish Drinking Project more broadly. Also, I'd really like to offer you the opportunity to sponsor this work. If you want to go to patreon.com/Jewish Drinking, I would greatly appreciate it. And if you have ideas for swag, also, please feel free to send them to me at drew@jewishdrinking.com. All right, thank you so much, L'chaim, and now back into the episode.
One other thing you mentioned earlier on with tequila. So I was going to ask you, because we recently had Passover. Tequila is a major... as a spirit goes, there's not many other spirits you can really have that are kosher for Passover. Tequila is a big one. But you mentioned there are supply chain issues with tequila.
Yeah.
So
COVID.
What's been going on?
All right. So in COVID in general, there were a lot of supply chain issues, and specifically with Mexico. So it was with tequila and beer. And so early on in COVID, like March and April time, there was, again, I'm not going to be exact with these things, and but probably about 3 weeks to a month where none of the glass workers came to work. So there was no glass for beer and there was no glass for tequila.
Oh my goodness.
Especially the fancy glass for tequila, the fancy ceramics and all the big fancy things. And so because of that, there was like 2 months where you couldn't get Corona or Modelo. Like Corona and Modelo, like we're talking about like you know what I mean? Where they're producing it so much and usually in the warehouses, couldn't get it, out of stock. And you had to like beg the salesman, and you had the beer sales, by the way, during the beginning of from March until November, till Thanksgiving, a little bit before Thanksgiving, even October. Beer sales in the big world was way up in COVID. Beer sales went nuts. And the other issue, and I'll get back to the glass in a second, since we were talking about with beer, is there was an aluminum issue. There wasn't enough aluminum in the country, and they couldn't. And so like all these breweries that switched to cans, some of them had to switch back to bottles in the U.S. Yeah, but then getting back to tequila, so especially like the Clase Azul. Have you heard of that brand? It's Clase Azul.
I haven't, but my tequila friend will.
Okay,
He'll have heard of it.
It's probably one of the most popular, if not the most popular reposado that you can get on the market. So we can talk a minute just about tequila. So tequila, there's the 3 main ones. There's Blanco, Reposado, and Añejo.
Right.
Right. And there's extra Añejo.
And then extra,
Right, exactly. So and it's basically Blanco is not aged at all. It's just right into the bottle. And then Reposado and Añejo are both aged in oak. But what's funny is that
so quick education for everybody. So Blancos are 0 to 3 months. Reposados are 3 to 12 months. Is that right? And then No, or something like that, or maybe like 3 to 6, and then 6 to 12 is añejo or something. Whatever. Añejo is like a year plus, 1 to 3, and extra is like 3 plus.
So okay, so it's interesting that you're saying that, because and the truth is, I would love if you or someone else can educate me, because my understanding is that there is no real rules when it comes to reposado and añejo in Mexico, and that there are some distilleries that that one distillery's reposado could be aged longer than another one's añejo. And now I could be wrong, but this is what I was told by a salesperson, because I never really looked into it.
So yeah, I thought, and someone's going to correct us. Totally, please. They're going to comment.
I want someone to correct me.
I think 0 to 3 is blanco, 3 to 12 is reposado, 12 months plus is añejo, and I think 1 to 3 years and 3 plus is extra añejo.
Okay, good to know. I'm always about education.
I'm sure someone's going to correct us on the
internet. Good. So basically, with these they have the Clase Azul has very fancy bottles and ceramics, and there's blue and white and like all different. And they couldn't get the bottle. So because of that, they couldn't get the bottles. They weren't producing. So it was out of stock for a long time. Then when they were producing it, the demand for those items were so high, right? And the supply was so low that the prices, where it used to be was you can get it for $80 or $90 a bottle, went up to $150 a bottle, because a store, even a big box store like Total Wine or Bottle King or whatever, they used to be getting, 10, 20 cases at a time. They got 1 case in a month or 2 cases. My store, right, which is way smaller than these big guys, and then when it comes to tequila, I have gotten up until, let's call it February of this year, right, or March. We'll call it 1 full year. I got 1 case, 6 bottles of Clase Azul Reposado, an item that I usually sell, let's say, 10 to 12 cases in a year. And I was only allowed to buy 1 case. And I had to beg for it. And it's like, and same thing with Don Julio 1942, and the same thing with all these other high-end tequilas. The supply was low, the demand was high, and what happened is, I learned in economics class, the prices went up.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's happened across the board. Now, it did not happen with Scotch, and did not happen with Bourbon. What's interesting with Scotch is that the tariffs happened very shortly pre-COVID. So a lot of it happened in October.
So the price went up.
Price went up, and then people didn't necessarily feel it until COVID. It was another side.
Did they move over to more bourbon then?
They moved to cheaper Scotch. Most people,
to cheaper
Scotch drinkers. Some of them have moved over to bourbon. But again, what's interesting? Also, you were talking about like Lagavulin, you're talking about the Islays and the more like peaty scotches. So I tend to see that people that enjoy those will enjoy bourbon. But people that only enjoy like Speyside and the Highlands and that Macallan and Glenlivet and they're very clean and very
the smoother ones.
The smoother, right? Smoother. I don't like that word, but yeah, the smoother one. Don't tend to like bourbons at all because of all the flavor that's in a bourbon. But again, like for me, that like I want flavor. Like, you know what I mean? That's sort of like what I'm going for. But to each their own.
One other thing I do want to ask is, I've heard anecdotally consumption has been higher nationwide since the pandemic. Have you noticed any changes in patterns in what people have been buying throughout the
pandemic? For sure, in what people have been buying. So the question that I've gotten more than any other question during the pandemic, and I was getting it during for the, let's say, first 7 or 8 months of the pandemic.
Yeah,
I was getting this question multiple times a day: is, are people drinking more now than what they were drinking before? So my answer is, people are buying more at home, and they're drinking more at home than they've ever drunk before. But they're not drinking at bars, and they're not drinking at simchas, and they weren't going out to dinners with their friends, and they weren't going out to conferences. They weren't drinking at any of these other things or kiddishes. They were only drinking at home.
Yeah.
So in my experience, most people were not drinking more than they were drinking. Matter of fact, they were probably drinking less than what they were drinking, but they were buying more alcohol for home use. Now, the one segment of the population that I think definitely, especially in the first 6 months of the pandemic, definitely were drinking more is moms between the ages of 26 and 40.
The ones with kids at home.
Because of all their kids at home. So that segment of the population, I think, definitely was drinking more than they normally were. And that has definitely come down since, at least in my area, most of the kids have gone back to school for this year. Now, not every area has that happened, but in Bergen County, New Jersey, except for the public schools, all the private schools are back in school. So by you, are they back in school by you?
Yeah. Okay. People are back in school by and large. Okay. Anything else you want to mention about stuff you've noticed in the pandemic?
In the pandemic, I would say, again, people were definitely more inner focused than anything else, because they couldn't go out, they couldn't do things. So I had people that actually got more into wine and more into or in whiskey, like more into tasting it and talking to me about the flavors and looking. Oh, and the other thing is, which is great, is that now all these customers I was delivering to, so I have records of all of them because they're in my system and I'm delivering. So everything. So the people even like, it's way better because when they were just coming into the store and buying it, I didn't put them in the system every time. Couldn't track them. Now I can track them, so it's better for the people because now they're like, I really like this wine. Do you remember it had a blue? There was blue on the label. It'd be unbelievable how many. You wouldn't believe me how many times people ask. But so this was really a great thing is that we're able to really go back and like, oh, you liked it. You like this wine because it was this kind of grape. It was come from this area. So why don't you try this? Or why don't you try that? There was a lot more of people growing in their knowledge also, which is, even though they weren't in store, I had a lot of conversations with all these people over the phone, which is also like helped, I think. And look, I hope we're getting back to it. Well, like I said, we're hopefully going to do tastings again in the store. Some people are itching for it. But at the same time, I want to be sensitive to the whole community. And in Teaneck, there's a lot of people that are still very sensitive. So I don't want to, step on anyone's toes, as you would say.
Mendy, is there anything you want to plug?
I want to plug Filler Up Kosher Wines in Teaneck, which is an awesome store. Yeah, again, I've been running it for 3 years, so it's my opinion. Otherwise, Smoke Wagon Bourbon is probably one of my new favorites. Again, they don't distill; they get from what's it called in Indiana. Help me out here.
Yeah, they're in Southeast Indiana.
Yeah, come on.
Midwest Grains, I want to say.
Midwest Grains, but there's another name for them. But anyway, they distill for a lot of what's it called? A lot of bourbon companies out there.
They've got 3 initials, the third of which is G.
Correct. Yes, I'm right there also. It's like, so their stuff is great and very value driven, which is also awesome. Otherwise, I would say the most important thing that I can plug is try new things when it comes to wine or whiskey or beer, tequila, whatever you're into. Find a local merchant. The big box stores are good if you know what you want. You know what I mean? Obviously, a lot of times you can get better deals on stuff. But if you go to a local wine store and you can make a relationship with someone there, and they can try to, learn your palate and try to help you expand it. And that, I think, is the most important thing, is that there's so much wine, there's so much whiskey, there's so much, liquor out on the market. And it's important for you to find what you like.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Man. All right, Mendy, thank you so much for joining this discussion and sharing your firsthand knowledge of this market, Mendy.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you,
All right.
and l'chaim.
L'chaim.